Okay, so let's be real for a sec. How many of us actually dreamt of being school superintendent when we grew up?
Not exactly the most glamorous job, is it?
Right. It's like high pressure, always in the spotlight. And then there's the whole dealing with school budgets thing, which sounds about as fun as a root canal.
Well said.
But, there is something about that role, that leader in the trenches, that just makes you kind of want to understand it a bit better.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Totally. And that's exactly why we are diving deep, my friend, into The Superintendent's Rulebook by Patrick Darfler-Sweeney.
Oh, great choice. It's a fascinating read.
Right. Forget those stuffy leadership books with vague advice.
Yeah.
This one's got 132 numbered rules, and they are like raw, unfiltered wisdom bombs.
It's true. It's not your typical leadership manual.
Hmm.
Darfler-Sweeney, he doesn't hold anything back. He just lays bare the complexities, the contradictions of being a school superintendent.
So it's like real talk.
Real talk. But you know what makes it really compelling? He connects these very specific experiences to, like, universal truths about leadership, about human nature, about just navigating systems, things that, let's face it, we all deal with.
Okay, so it's like a crash course in leadership, but disguised as a deep dive into the wild world of school systems.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, so 132 rules. Where do we even begin?
Well, the book is structured around some key aspects of the job, and the first one that really grabbed my attention is human resources. It's never just about the job description.
Oh man, that title alone. That title alone is giving me flashbacks to every awkward office birthday party I've ever been to.
Right.
It's like he's saying, buckle up, kid, because the human drama never ends, especially in a school system.
And he would know.
Okay, so give us the good stuff.
Yeah.
What's one of these rules that really gets to the heart of this whole human resources thing?
Okay, rule number 1. You have no friends in your school system.
Whoa. Okay. That's a bit intense. Is he saying, like, superintendents need to be cold-hearted robots, no more Friday morning donuts with the staff?
Not at all. No, it's not about being unfriendly, right? It's about understanding the inherent tensions
Oh, wow.
and competing interests a superintendent has to navigate every single day.
Yeah.
Think about it. You're balancing the needs of teachers, parents, students, the school board, even the wider community. Everyone wants what's best.
Right.
But those visions of best, they rarely, if ever, perfectly align.
So how do you actually lead effectively in that environment? It's like you're building consensus with one hand, putting out fires with the other constantly.
It's a constant juggling act, and it's about building trust, but also being aware that every decision, even the small ones, they're going to be scrutinized.
Right.
A superintendent has to be comfortable not always being the most popular person in the room.
Which leads perfectly into another rule from this section that caught my eye, Rule 7. Compliments improve everyone's hearing. Is he talking about, like, literally speaking louder here, or is there something deeper at play?
Oh, it's so much more than just volume.
Yeah.
This rule, it highlights the power of recognition, especially in such a high-stress environment like a school.
Yeah.
Think about it. Teachers, they pour their hearts into their work. They face immense challenges, and a little appreciation can go such a long way.
It's like that saying, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar.
Exactly.
But I imagine it's easy to forget the honey when you are, drowning in paperwork and dealing with, well, everything a superintendent deals with.
Absolutely. But remembering to acknowledge the hard work of your team, to genuinely celebrate those successes, even the small ones, that can make a world of difference in morale. It just creates a more positive environment for everyone.
And that positive environment, that's crucial, not just for the adults in the room, but for the students, too.
You're sure.
Speaking of students, there's another rule that really stood out in this section. Rule 34, school looks good, you look good.
Yeah, that one jumped out at me, too. It speaks to that incredibly public nature of the job, right? The superintendent is often seen as the face of the entire district.
Right.
And everything, from test scores to the state of the school building, it reflects on them.
So it's not enough to just focus on the internal workings of the school system. You also have to manage public perception, which, let's be honest, that can feel like a full-time job in itself these days.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
And that's just a taste of the human resources challenges a superintendent faces. The book delves into everything from navigating union negotiations to managing your own time effectively when, let's face it, everyone wants a piece of you.
It's like this first section alone is a crash course in leadership, navigating those complex relationships, all before we even get to the classroom.
And things are about to get even more, well, let's just say interesting as we move into the next section of the book, political realities, more like political minefields.
Okay, I gotta be honest. That title does not exactly scream relaxing. Sounds like we've moved from the principal's office straight into, like, an episode of House of Cards.
You're not far off. You know, Darfler-Sweeney, he really doesn't sugarcoat the political realities of this job.
Yeah.
He uses these rules, though, to paint this really vivid picture of the constant negotiations, the compromised, and sometimes, honestly, the just downright uncomfortable situations the superintendent finds themselves in.
So it's not just about making what you think is the best decision for the students. It's also about navigating like this whole web of opinions and agendas that come with really any leadership position, but especially one this public facing.
Exactly. You're always aware of the stakeholders. And one of the rules that really highlights this whole balancing act is Rule 11, always carry a smartphone.
Okay, at first glance, that just sounds like, common sense in this day and age. I mean, everyone's glued to their phones, right?
True. But for a superintendent, that smartphone, it's more than just a way to like stay connected with friends and family.
Right.
It's a direct line to the school community's hopes, anxieties, and let's be real, sometimes they're very, very strong opinions. They're always on call, dealing with everything from like late night facilities emergencies to social media firestorms, you name it, it ends up on their phone.
So it's that always on feeling, but like amplified tenfold when you're the superintendent. And I imagine that bleeds over into their personal life too, right? Speaking of which, Rule 60 really struck me. You and your family live in the bubble. It's like this job isn't just something you do, it's something you like inhabit 24/7.
That's a really good point, and it's something that's so often overlooked. This rule, it highlights the personal sacrifices that just come with the territory. Superintendents and their families, they're constantly in the public eye. Every decision, every statement, even their personal choices can be, well, scrutinized, debated.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how they find a balance. How do you separate work life from personal life when your community is essentially your workplace?
Right. It's a constant challenge. And it speaks to the importance of having a really strong support system outside of the school system itself. Because even within the system, there are times when a superintendent can feel very alone, especially when they have to make those tough decisions.
And that's where we get to Rule 54, which, honestly, this one sent a shiver down my spine a little. Do not expect your BOE to stand behind you when the sparks fly. Yikes.
Oof. Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow for sure. But it's a crucial reality check for anyone in this role. Well, ideally, a school board, a superintendent, they work together, right? But there are going to be times when a superintendent has to make a difficult call, a decision that might not be popular with everyone, even the board itself.
So it's like walking a tightrope, but the rope is on fire, and the people holding the rope are also, like, judging your every step.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this section of the book is so important. It's not meant to, like, scare anyone away from the superintendent role.
Right.
But it's to prepare them for those very real political challenges they will face. It's about going into the job with eyes wide open.
It's interesting. We've talked about the intense relationships, the constant public scrutiny, the political tightrope walk. It makes you wonder why anyone would actually want this job.
It's a fair question, and I think that's where the final section of the book really shines. Darfler-Sweeney shifts gears a bit here, taking us from the trenches of daily challenges to something more profound, something he calls lighthouse, guiding the ship through storms and bureaucracy.
Okay, I like the sound of that. It's like we've moved from surviving to thriving, from managing chaos to leading with purpose. Give us an example. What's one of these lighthouse rules that really embodies this shift?
One that immediately comes to mind is Rule 87. Recommit yourself each and every day. It sounds simple, maybe even a bit obvious, but when you're in the thick of things, facing one difficult decision after another, it's easy to lose sight of the why behind your work.
Especially when that work involves things like deciphering school budgets and navigating school board politics. Not exactly the stuff that gets you jumping out of bed in the morning, even for the most dedicated educator.
Exactly. But this rule reminds us that even in the midst of those less than glamorous tasks, there's a bigger purpose at play. It's about finding ways to reconnect with your passion for education, that desire to make a real difference in the lives of students.
Because at the end of the day, it's those students, those young minds looking to you for guidance that really matter. And this next rule really drives that home in a powerful way. Rule 104, the students only go through the system once.
That one always hits me hard. It's a stark reminder of the lasting impact educators have on the lives of their students. Every decision a superintendent makes, from curriculum choices to extracurricular activities to disciplinary policies, shapes a child's experience, their opportunities, their very sense of self.
Wow. It's like suddenly those budget meetings and school board presentations take on a whole new level of significance when you really think about it that way. It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about shaping futures.
Precisely. And that sense of responsibility can be daunting, but it's also incredibly motivating.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder for all of us, no matter what our field is, to think about the ripple effects of our work, the way our decisions, big and small, impact the people around us.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about navigating those storms and bureaucracy. There's one last rule in the book that feels particularly relevant here, Rule 118. The best learning happens after we make a mistake.
That's such an important one. In a role like this, where the stakes are so high, it's easy to get caught up in the pressure to always have the right answer, to make the perfect decision. But the reality is, we're all human, and mistakes are inevitable.
So it's not about avoiding mistakes altogether. It's about how we approach them, how we learn and grow from those inevitable missteps.
Exactly. This rule is about embracing a growth mindset even, or maybe especially in the face of challenges. It's about creating a culture where it's okay to take risks, to admit when you're wrong, and to learn from those experiences.
That's such a powerful message, and it really resonates with me. It makes you think, what if we all approached our work, our relationships, even our own personal growth, with that same openness to learning from our mistakes?
It's a simple shift in perspective, but it can be truly transformative.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the superintendent's rulebook. What a journey it's been. We've explored the complexities, the challenges, and ultimately the profound significance of this often misunderstood role.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you.
And for our listeners, if you're ready to challenge your assumptions about leadership, education, and maybe even yourself, I highly encourage you to pick up a copy of the Superintendent's Rulebook. You just might be surprised at what you discover.
And who knows, you might even feel inspired to start leading with a little more courage, a little more heart, and maybe even a well-placed compliment or two.
Here to that. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.